Subscribe and score when you sign up for the Inside Edge, the Kraken's newsletter. Sign up before April 18th for a chance to win prizes like signed gear, Brooks shoes, and more. Go to seattlekraken.com/email for more info. Feel like you're part of the game by watching the Kraken while skating on their practice ice. Join our skate and watch parties on April 7th and 10th to immerse yourself with fellow fans. You could go home a winner with a Kraken-themed raffle at each skate. Learn more and register at KrakenCommunityIceplex.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Signals from the Deep, the official podcast of your Seattle Kraken. This is episode number 31. I am Piper Shaw, joined as always by the one and only Joshua Thomas Brown.
Happy to be here. Always.
And of course, producer extraordinaire Grant. How are you, Grant?
I'm well. I took the episode off last week. I have a lot of opinions about some things y'all said.
We haven't debriefed.
JT, you need to get a cat.
All right.
It needs to happen. So I will help you go look for a cat to adopt. We can do this. It'll be a nice day out. What do you think?
If that ever happens, we'd have to record it.
We'll think about it in the summer.
We'll take the GoPro. It'll be great.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, we have a very special treat for all of you. It has taken us a couple weeks here, a couple months to nail down this guest because he is so busy and so popular for very good reason. But we have the one and only John Forslund with us today.
What a build-up.
Oh, yes.
I don't think I deserve that.
Oh, my gosh. The announcer.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, the announcer. Yeah,
You're the announcer.
The announcer, yes. I like that better.
Just the announcer?
Yeah, formerly known as.
Formerly known as. Okay. Well, we just wanted to make the most of our time with you and talk a little bit about your life and your career and everything that you've been through in the National Hockey League.
You sure you want to do this?
I do, because JT and I have had the privilege
You're
of...
both sure?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We've had the privilege
If you're not off, then I won't take it personally.
Well, we've had the privilege of hearing so many of your amazing stories over the years, and I think the
a lot of
fans
pressure,
would
Piper.
love it. No, it's not. Well,
It's early in the morning.
yeah.
We just left the rink.
You stayed at the rink?
I did.
Yeah,
I
John
did.
sleeps at the rink.
Yeah, after wins, I do.
Oh,
Yeah.
for good luck.
We'll just leave it at that.
For good luck. Well, let's just jump right into things, unless you have somewhere that you
go
wanted
right
to
ahead,
start.
Pipe.
So, John, you are from Massachusetts.
Yes, I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts.
You sure are.
Yeah, Western Massachusetts.
And you started your career in the American Hockey League.
I sure did.
In Springfield.
I did.
What was that time for you like? Right out of college, you get this job with the Springfield Indians. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it was an accident, really.
Okay.
So, I grew up there, and I went to a ton of games there with my dad. That's where my love of hockey really started with my father. But what happened was I was in graduate school, and I was pursuing a management career. I also was a certified physical education teacher and a coach, and I thought I wanted to become a baseball coach. And I was coaching prep school baseball, Garden City, New York. And they offered me a job. They wanted me to stay there and teach at a private school and coach the team and all this. And I thought about it, and it would sound like a pretty good opportunity. But I had to do an internship for the last thing for my master's, and I really wanted to go to West Point. They had a television opportunity, and I had started this TV broadcasting aspiration in college. Actually started when I was 8 years old, but it wasn't until college where I didn't major in this, where I got some advice from a news director that I should pursue this business someday. So I was sending out some feelers and doing some things, and it was working with the West Point football program. The Army-Navy game in 1984 was going to be played at the Rose Bowl, and they had a weekly coaches show. And there were like 3 finalists to be the host of this show. And I lost out. I didn't get it. So somebody that I knew through the American Hockey League offices, which are in Springfield, knew the owner of the Springfield Indians, a guy named Peter Cooney. And he brought me in for a potential internship. And in the middle of the conversation, he said to me, "Do you have any broadcasting experience?" I said, "Yeah, I got a ton." Okay, because I started this hobby when I was 8 years old with my dad, calling games off the television, recording every game. He did color. I did the play-by-play. His buddies would come over. They'd have a few drinks and watch the game. They liked it more. The more they drank, the better I sounded. And we watched the Boston Bruins religiously. Okay, the Bruins were the best team in the NHL in the early 70s with Bobby Orr and all those guys. And we watched every single game because we could get it somehow. We're 90 miles west of Boston, but my dad with an antenna and a booster could bring the games in, right? A little fuzzy. But anyway, I prepared and did all my stuff, and this was my hobby, right? And that's what I did. I wasn't a great reader. And my mom said, you got to start reading. I said, I hate reading, Mom. I can't do it. It bores me. I put the book down. I never did the summer reading. You know, I did the Cliff Notes and all that stuff. Please, kids, don't listen to this. But I did. but I did. And but anyway, hockey, for some reason, and I'm a big sports fan, and I played a ton of baseball. Hockey, for some reason, I was so intrigued by the history of the game. I read everything available to me. So all these books by Stan Fischler and others, I read, and I learned the history of the game, and I became a better student because of that. And my mom kept pushing me in that direction. I had great parents. My mom and dad were so positive and always telling me that you can do something instead of you can't. And anyway, so Pete gave me a chance, and he never asked me for who. And he never asked me, do you have a tape or a sample? He said, I got a guy who's brand new, who struggles a little bit. Can you do color for him? And I did. And after 1 year, that guy wasn't very good at his job, and he really didn't like it much. He left, and he gave me the play-by-play job, and I did it for 7 years.
So did you always know that you wanted to do play-by-play?
Yes.
Like from when you were a kid?
I wanted to do play-by-play of anything. Like what got me into this was I voiced over the 1981 Super Bowl for a broadcast class, an elective class in college, and this news director from the NBC station, when it was over, he grabbed me, and I was a junior, and he said, I got two things to say to you. I have a job to offer you out in Utah at one of our stations. If you want to be an anchor right now, you can leave school. You can go to another school out there. What do you think? I said, no, I don't want to do that. I was firmly entrenched in school and doing what I did. And then he said, okay, but if you ever get a chance to do this, go for it, because I think you have a knack that you can't teach in a classroom.
Absolutely.
So I kept that in mind. I used it as an inspiration, and hook or by crook, there we go. So I got an opportunity, and then I started to work at what I did and refine what I did. And I did, like all these minor league jobs, you do everything under the sun, right? I did the PR and the stats and the group sales and ad sales in the summer to prove that I should draw some kind of salary, which was very little. And thank God my wife had a full-time job, and she kind of carried the mail with benefits because I had zero of that too. So we went through all of that for 7 years, and it was a great experience.
Yeah. Going back to when you were a kid, you were saying how when you were calling games, you were doing all of your prep and you were writing all of your notes. How has that evolved for you over the years? Because I know that that's still a huge part of your routine.
Yeah. And it's a great question. And my if people see that notebook, I mean, it's no different than what I did when I was a kid. It's a little bit more refined, and I figured out some things that I need and don't need, but it's very similar to what I did. And then the minor leagues, I did the same thing. And then when I got to the NHL, I just continued on. And then over time, they figured out ways to make it easier for announcers to prep for games through, the computer and all things of that nature. But I just like it because I can remember by writing things down.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, you talked about kind of the prep side, and a lot of people don't get to see that side. John, you're talking about the book. Obviously, we get to see that, but kind of take us through what a typical game day is like for you. Talk about being a student of the game, and nobody prepares the way you do, and just how do you find the time to do all of that?
Okay, so when I go into this, I don't want to come off like I'm some kind of high and mighty prepster that preps real, but I do prep hard, and I appreciate you asking me that. I have a great life, okay? And I'm a well-rounded person. I have a wonderful family. I'm 100% hockey, but I want people to understand that I'm not some crazy individual, okay? Because all I do is watch hockey, okay? And I feel that I have to watch every single night when I'm not working and that's even if, I've got family around, and when the kids were small, I figured out a way to tape games and stay up late when everybody went to bed and virtually kill myself to do this because I got to visualize the game. So I have to watch the games to see A, where the teams are at, and B, visualize players so that I can basically identify them quickly and not make too many mistakes. We all make mistakes, but that's kind of what I do to prep and watch games. And I love watching hockey. So that's my whole life in season. If it's an off night, I'm watching the teams that we're going to play next, or I'm covering for other networks, and I'm trying to see at least 2 of their games prior to seeing them live. That's impossible sometimes. And then I start the day before with the basic shell of the notebook, which is about an hour's worth, maybe an hour and a half of initial prep, line combinations, and just so I have something to go off of in the morning. And in the morning, it's more of the detail work. I get up pretty early. I log every game that's played the night before, and I go through every single game. I keep track of every team, and I write their records down in a little book, chicken scratched out, so I can see their trends. Watch all the highlights, and then I get to our game, and then I get to skates usually between the 2 teams, and then I go back and finish and get to the rink very early, 3 o'clock, 3:15, and relax, as you know. I don't like to do any work from once I get there. I'm just, some guys and women who do this job will prep right before the game, and that's and they're great at it. That's their choice. I just don't like that. I like to talk and sit there, have a coffee, and watch another game, which we have the benefit of on the West Coast.
And you also go back and you watch every broadcast and every game back.
It's been hard this year because of the more national work that I've done. But I tried to, and I watched our Calgary game in full because I wasn't feeling 100%, and I wanted to hear what that sounded like. It was okay. It was better than I thought it was. And then I watch, bits and pieces of games to make sure that we're covering off technically the way we should do a game, which our guys do a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. You all do a fantastic job in your roles. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And then I watch the national games back too. But for selfish reasons, for repetition, overuse of phrases, mistakes, I wouldn't say that again if I had, a chance. There's a lot of things that you want to be perfect. And in this business, nobody's perfect. But in broadcasting, you're supposed to be perfect, and we all make mistakes on the air.
Yeah, and you brought up the national side. Obviously, watching all of those games definitely helps to be able to broadcast those. But can you give us maybe an insight of the differences between, you calling a game here for the Kraken versus, when you're going on a national?
Yeah, so JT, the difference is when you do a Kraken game, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve. You're here every day mostly. You're invested in what we're doing. You care more than 100%. And when the team doesn't play well, you kind of figure out a way to prop them up, figure out a way the fans can be entertained by watching and not feel the misery of maybe a losing streak. And then when they're winning, make sure you're carrying the excitement, but don't build it up like we're going to have 8 parades before we get to the championship, which someday will happen here. And, that's kind of what you do. And because of that, you ride a roller coaster. And you're also working with the same people over and over again on almost a daily basis, which is not easy to do because everybody, at times gets a little bit frustrated with each other. It's natural in a work environment. A national game, you all come in for that one game. And when you come in for that one game, it's a 50-50 presentation. And it's a very refreshing thing to do because you can't lose. You can't have to, figure out a reason for why they're losing, or I'm not going to say make an excuse, but try to dress it up a little bit, which every home broadcast does. Nationally, you just lay out the facts. Here it is. This is where this team is. This team is. And then you have the benefit of so many people, certainly with Amazon, so many people around you to help prepare for the game, information. This is what we're going to do. Multiple cameras, all these things help you as a broadcaster. And then the teams are anxious to hear from you because you're national. Right. So instead of us where we're all here, they come again, it's a different situation. It's totally different. And the playoffs are the best situation anybody can be involved in.
So you have a couple of iconic phrases and calls that people love to hear. One of them, hey, whaddya say? I was hoping that you could kind of share the backstory, the significance of that call to you.
So I'm basically doing what I'm doing because, like I said before, my father took me to a bunch of games when I was a kid, okay? And starting at 8 years old. And that was our thing. Okay. My dad was older. So my sister's 9 years older than I am. And my sister was very sick when she was young. So from like birth to 5, they weren't sure she was going to live. Okay. And so they were fully vested she was born in 52. So they're fully invested through the 50s in this kind of situation. I came along in 62. I'm not sure I was supposed to come along, but I did. And they were kind of like older. So my dad worked a ton, and he had no education. He went to the war at 17 as a Marine in World War II. He came out of the war. He wanted to settle in San Diego. My mom had no interest in that. She was from Springfield. So he was too from Springfield. So they went back and started a family, Swedish, Italian, this kind of mix. That's an interesting combination. Yeah. And anyway, so my dad, when I did see him, we went to hockey games, right? And because he was older, everything I did with sports, I had to do myself, right? So the only regret I have in my life is that my son put skates on when he was 3. I didn't put skates on till I was 12. And these little kids were better than I was. And I was too egotistical and had too much pride to handle that. And I didn't want to learn. But I loved hockey, right? So it's kind of a weird thing, if you can relate to that. So my dad would take me to games and we bonded. And that was my time with my dad. And we did that all the time. And so through high school, I still did these things with the tape recorder and everything with my father because he loved doing it. So anyway, here's the sad part of the whole story. I get my job in Springfield in 1984, and they hire me as an intern first, no pay, right? January, they put me on the payroll. January 11th, I get my first paycheck. I was still living at home. I go home, and Natalie, my wife, we were dating. We weren't even engaged yet. We might have been engaged. But anyway, she was at the house too. Went to the hockey game. My dad was at the hockey game with my mom. Natalie and I went out after the game to bar or something. And my dad waved and he went home. I went home too, like 1 a.m, whatever, and they were asleep. Early in the morning, my mom's screaming, my dad's passing away. So I'm certified in CPR. I was at the time. I gave my dad CPR and my dad passed and in my arms. So I was 22. Okay. So now my whole life shattered and I had to figure out, I'm just starting my broadcasting career, just starting. And so now I'm hitting the road. Now they gave me like a week off and I came back and now I'm going on the road with the team. So JT, you sit on the bus and the iron lung in the 80s was truly an iron lung. No sleepers. We just had a VCR television at the front of the bus. Maybe there was one for the boys halfway back. No card tables. This was bare to the bones, and we traveled a lot. So I had a lot of time to think. I got a little depressed. I worked through that. We got married in 86. So I think it was around 86, I decided that my dad always used to say to people, hey, what do you say? So he'd meet you guys, Piper, JT. Hey, what do you say? I'm Ralph. And he said on the ball field, because he coached me when I was a little kid. And so I used it on a goal. And I was like, wow, okay. And then as I thought about it more, I said, I'm going to use it on goals that clinch the game. And I just did it. And so in the minor leagues, you're broadcasting about 12 people. That's about the amount of your audience. No one's really listening. Anyway, I did it. The team won 2 Calder Cups in the late 90s, and I got recognition for this phrase. And they wrote a story about it. And I carried it with me to the NHL. And I wasn't sure I was going to use it. And I decided, okay, I'm going to use it. It's for my father. So there have been some people early in my career that said it's hokey, it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And but I don't care. At that point, when I was a young broadcaster, I just said to myself, I don't care. It's for my father. That's it. It's a personal thing. And that's what I do. When I think the game's over, I do it. Sometimes in the second period, mostly in the third period, certainly in overtime. And they want me to use it nationally on Amazon. I never did on NBC, but I've been using it with Amazon, which I appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for sharing
that's
story,
where that came
John.
from.
I knew that it was so special to you, but I don't know that
tell
fans
that story
know.
much. So
Thank you so much for being willing to share that.
Yeah.
So fans, you snuck this in there, but you said that you use it when you think the game is over. When
That's
you
right.
think, and it
I've
could
been
be
burned
at
a
any
few
point.
times.
Yeah.
I've been burned a few times, but I'll go to it when I think it should be over.
Yeah.
And then I can blame whoever for if it didn't happen.
That's a good cue, though.
Yes.
Anybody listening, now you know. If you hear John say
that's
it.
a clincher.
So how about then for That's Kraken Hockey Baby. Is that one just
Yeah.
a feel then? Like how does that one go?
Yeah,
And when
so-
you want to use the difference between those two within a game?
Well, that comes from That's Hockey Baby, which I used in Carolina. And I started using that on great plays. So the play has to delight me. Okay. I'm very selfish on this.
Yep.
If the play doesn't do anything for me, then it's a goal. And, Adnan Verk, who's our host on Amazon, he's like, oh, I wanted to hear That's Hockey Baby tonight. I said, well, none of the goals excited me.
It didn't delight me.
They were good goals, but I mean, it's just not, if it's a tap in or, it's usually a point shot tip, maybe not so much. But like Schwartz's goal, as we taped this last night, that was a tic-tac goal play. It was a beautiful passing play. That's hockey, right? So I added Kraken when I got this job as a hashtag for all the stuff we did prior to launch. So every social tweet I threw out there when the Kraken took a step in the community, when they announced an initiative, all these different things. I recognized very early that the Kraken were going to be more than just what goes on in the 200 by 85. They're going to be, community based. So that's Kraken hockey. Everything that happens here, that's Kraken hockey. And then I decided, well, let's just put that all together and tag a win. And that's where I just did it. I just did it from the very beginning. And luckily, everybody likes it, and we go on, and, I didn't copyright it or anything. Probably should have.
Probably should after this.
Yeah, but that's all right.
Yeah.
I share it.
Another part of your call and kind of your brand as a broadcaster too, that I know is fun for us to listen and watch develop, as well as for the fans, is your knack for coming up with great nicknames.
Oh, the nicknames.
For players.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a thing for me. Like, I come up with a nickname. I don't verify it with the player. If the player has a real issue with anything I'm saying, which they all hear it, I know it gets back to them. They'll go to PR and they'll say, can he stop doing it? So I just think that, again, this is a selfish thing, but I do think that fans enjoy that type of thing, right? So I really started doing it in Hartford. Keith Primo might have been the first guy that I tagged with I called him the K train, because he reminded me of a freight train, the way he used to have the move, coming down the off wing, he'd lower the shoulder, take it right to the net, and he'd score all the time. Eric Cole with the Hurricanes did that a lot too. But anyway, that was a K train, and I've come up with these different nicknames, but I try to make it fit the play, like Larson. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
There is another big cat in the league, okay? And nobody has the right to just claim a nickname and you're the only one, okay? Unless you're maybe Gretzky or, MJ or whatever, whatever you want to look at here. People know what that is. But, Larson reminds me of a cat because the way he plays, yes, and he pounces on attacking players. He pounces on pucks. He plays a game, and the way the cats are. That's the first thing that jumped out at me. Then you take a look at his personality, and he gives you that grin. And
He's got the whiskers.
He's got the whiskers. He's very quiet, and he's big, right? And he plays big. So he's a big cat.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think the fans, it builds identity.
Absolutely.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're just trying to give the game some excitement.
Some character.
And a little sauce. Yeah. They just have fun with it. So I like, because we all use nicknames, right? And, we're not going to use the last name with the E, like a Schwartzy or something like that. Or,
right.
But we're going to use something that maybe is a little bit turbo, that came with him. Now, some of these names come with the guys. Pepper Pot I came up with myself.
Yes.
And that was a one that, there's people talking about it like it was some strange thing or whatever. But Yanni reminded me of a pepper pot, someone that stirs up a little bit of trouble all the time.
A little bit of spicy.
Yeah, I just love that all the nicknames are earned, right? Like you have to go out there. It's about their play, but it's also, they're true, right? And that's where you say.
Exactly. And we have, Yanni Newman, right? And obviously if you're a Seinfeld fan, which is a dated reference, and you have to be careful today with what you do as an older guy, I can't assume that everybody understands, some of these references. So the Hello Newman thing does fit him, but I've already determined I might use it later in his career if I'm still here, and I hope I am, and he is. But at the beginning of his career, I'm certainly not going to use it on his first NHL goal. Yeah. Right? It's his name. It's the first goal in the NHL. That's it. And for right now, every goal he scores should be kind of characterized that way.
How do you take kind of the responsibility, but also the privilege of being able to capture these moments for a franchise and kind of keep them for forever? Like his first goal that is going to be such an important part of not only his career, but also potentially for the Kraken long term, that kind of responsibility of being able to detail that moment in that story.
Well, that's one of the reasons, along with many others, that I took the job. I was offered the job and took this job, and I had a choice to make between Seattle and Tampa Bay at the time. And I took this job because I already had the opportunity in Carolina to mark time. You know, one of the rewards of being a play-by-play caller is your voice will be attached, for better or for worse, with whatever landmark moments happen. So in our first win, our first goal, our first power play, first this, first that, you know, I really was intrigued by doing that again because, you know, we were Hartford, but we were brand new in Carolina. So for almost 25 years, I was marking time there. You know, all of Ronnie's milestones that he hit. Jeff Skinner, who we just saw here the other night, you know, when he broke in as a rookie. Aho, all these kids that are playing now with the Hurricanes, you know, all their firsts and all the opportunities in the playoffs. Jordan Eberle's first ever playoff overtime winning goal. I mean, if I leave tomorrow, at least I know that I called that, right?
Yeah.
And so years down the road, you'll hear those. We see it now with the other teams in Seattle, with the Mariners and so on, with all the great moments they've had now that they've opened their season. They kind of relive some of the memories. Well, you know, Dave Niehaus is on all those calls, you know, the late great. And so, you know, that's the beauty of being a play caller at this level.
I want to go back. We talked a little bit about your time in Springfield, but you've referenced the time in Hartford. And obviously with Carolina, I kind of want to get to those transitions as well, because just obviously very important memories in the history of the NHL, but also for your career. So how did that transition for you to Hartford happen?
Oh, boy. Well, there were rumors, you know, for a long time. I got to Hartford in 1991. I got there in a way that I didn't expect to. I had to take a job that I didn't really want, but I had to get out of the American League. I had to take a jump and get let's say, a real job. So I was originally going to Hartford as a color commentator on the radio and a hockey information director, they called me. They wanted me to work with the team on PR, and they wanted the PR guy at the time to just do the business side of the operation and kind of have me work under him. He quit when he heard this was happening. He didn't like the fact that I was showing up, and he went on and did some other things, and they gave me the PR job at 29. And I took it, and I think I did well with it, but I did come in the summer after they traded Ron Francis. And when they traded Ron Francis to Pittsburgh, the season ticket base went from 11,800 to 6,500.
Wow.
In one summer. And all we did was repair work because he was so popular and the trade didn't make any sense to the fans and they turned their backs on us. Then the ownership was kind of weak and he was looking to get a deal with the state. And that was breaking down. The team was going to move. The team was going to do a lot of different things. There was a lockout, not a lockout, but a stoppage briefly. And there was a lot of stuff happening. And then finally the team was sold. And there was a new owner coming in from Detroit by the name of Peter Karmanis and CompuWare. They bought the team. They brought Jim Rutherford with them as the GM and the president of the team. And their mission was, I guess, to make it work in Hartford. That's what they thought they could do, but they needed a new arena deal. So they asked the fans to pony up, and they did. 99% capacity. They filled the building every game. Season tickets sold out to keep the team there. The state wouldn't cooperate and give him the deal he wanted, so he moved the team. How did I find out? We did a game in March. It was around St. Patrick's Day. And Patrick Waugh came in at the Colorado Avalanche and stoned the Whalers. Shots were 49-15 Hartford. And Waugh, it was 3, I think he shut them out. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, he was stellar. And Colorado won the game, and we did the game, and I packed up, and Natalie was at the game, and we got in the car, and we drove back home. We got home, and we got ready to have a bite to eat and get to bed and whatever, and put on the local news. Turned on the local news, Whalers are moving. No one told us.
And your PR.
There was rumor, yes, and I was doing the broadcast by then. I was doing television by then. I had gotten out of the PR because what I did is when I got there, I said, "This is not really what I want to do,
right.
but I'll do it." And then they wanted me to continue, and I did it 1 year with the new ownership because they liked what I was doing. But I told Jimmy, I really am going to go somewhere else unless something happens here, and something happened there, and I got the job for television in 1995. So that's how that happened. So we watched the news, and I looked at her, and she said, "Did you know this?" And I said, we're seeing this for the first time. Next day, there was an organizational meeting, and it was explained to us. And by May, we got a letter, and it was awful because the whole front office, there were 2 letters. One was welcome to Raleigh, and the other was this is your severance package.
Oh, my.
So all of our friends and all the people you worked with, and we had a tight front office, you can imagine, because of the uproar. And so anyway, people that worked under me when I was doing the PR, the community relations director, and all these different people didn't get a job. And a handful of us were allowed to go to Raleigh. I was one of them. I had to make a decision, and I did. And I made a great decision because it was a great place to raise our family. But we moved lock, stock, and barrel with a 1-year-old, and Natalie was 8 months pregnant, and we had a beagle, and my mom came to help, and then she never left. But she was just coming to help, and then she stayed in North Carolina for the rest of her life. But we could only go 2 hours a day because my wife was on bed rest for hypertension. So we went 2 hours and stopped, and then another 2 hours and stopped. I'm lucky I didn't get divorced.
Man.
Right there.
That would be a tough one.
And then, can you imagine how great she was about it?
And you have a 1-year-old and a dog.
And Natalie never complained. And then we got to North Carolina, and we're like, what is this? Because we were not an expansion team. So there was no buildup. We moved in 4.5 months, and they were not in tune with why we were even there.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll tell a funny story quickly. My mom used to get her hair done like twice a week, and I used to take her there. She had this, like a 60s thing, and all prepped up. A do, yeah. So I took her. She didn't drive, so I took her. I had to take her everywhere. But I take her, drop her off, and I picked her up, and she said, I had an interesting conversation with the hairstylist. I said, well, what happened? She said, and the woman was Southern. No disrespect to Southern people, but here we go. So she said, why are you here? I said, well, my mother goes, well, my son's job took him here. And at that time, all the tech companies were migrating to Raleigh, like from the north and from Pittsburgh and Buffalo. And, there was a lot of AT&T.
Big growth then.
Big growth, right? Big tech growth. And she's like, oh, your son got transferred down here for his job. What does he do? And my wife goes, oh, well, he's involved with the hurricanes. And she said, oh, isn't that nice? Must be nice to have a weatherman in the family.
Must be nice.
No idea.
Yeah, no idea.
And there was no buildup. It's a different era, right? So anyway, we got it going, and we got that off the ground, and it was a great experience.
Okay, before we get deeper into your time in Carolina, I know that you have a great story, a travel story from when you were with the Whalers.
Yeah, so it was, along with the jobs that I did.
I love this story. I need everybody to hear it.
With the jobs that I did, I became someone that, by accident, before they have team services, which now, it's a whole thing. And you got great people that do this job for all the teams. As you know, as an ex-player, you rely on them heavily. Well, back in the dark ages, we had didn't have this. Philadelphia was the only team that really had team services. And anyway, I started doing it, and the players, I always got along with the guys, right? I always got along with the players when I was younger, and, I got a lot of friends still. And so I was good at that, and I was organized, and I could talk to them, and they liked dealing with me. So because they liked dealing with me, I had to do the travel because they didn't want to deal with anybody else, right? So I started doing all these things, and this was when we just started chartering. Okay, we just started. A lot of the teams were still flying commercial. We had new owners who wanted to go first class, and we wanted to be like Philly. Philly and the Rangers were the two teams that traveled better than anybody. And the word got around, and they were getting players because of that. And that was the kind of thing for free agency. So we wanted to change our dynamic as being a kind of a frugal team to a team that, spent more money.
Took care of the guys.
And took care of the guys. So we're in Boston. It's a blizzard. Afternoon game with the Bruins, and I'm doing radio color. And I'm on the air. And my phone, and this is the beginning of cell phones, we get a message and I think it was a BlackBerry. Okay, that's how old this is. So I get a message.
What year?
This was 1994. Okay, so I get a BlackBerry message. We got trouble, tomorrow in Quebec. It's a back-to-back, 2 afternoon games. Boston Saturday afternoon, Quebec on Sunday afternoon. So I go down after the game. And I tell the coaches we got some issues. We might not be able to get into Quebec tonight. What do we? And we lost the game in Boston. So now I'm hearing expletives. I'm hearing what the hell are we going? Sorry, what are we going to do? You know, all these different things. It's my fault. I can't control the weather.
Of course it is. Yep.
Right? They all go through this. Baxi goes through this, and he does a great job here for us. And you know, this is you got to go in a closet and scream and come out smiling if you do this job, because people are asking, the players are asking questions. They all have something to
Patience
say.
is thin.
They're all experts in everything. They even have aeronautical experience. Some of them, you know, like they all do. Right. So now
They've got a weatherman on staff now.
so Jimmy Rutherford, who's now in Vancouver, you know, he comes to me like, what are we going to do now? And I said, Jim, I have no idea. Well, you better figure it out. I said, okay, I'll figure it out. So in the meantime, what I didn't tell you is during the game, I was on the phone, press box phone with Gary Bettman and the league, determining whether or not we're going to leave. And he's telling us we have to find a way to get there. Okay, so, that was the story. So now what do we do with the players? We can't get to the airplane. We're in Boston. We get on the bus. We take them to Quincy Market. We dump them all off. We tell them to go in the restaurant. The restaurant cleared out half the side, and they go in there and they had dinner and drinks or whatever. And I had to go to something called a phone booth. Mm-hmm. Okay. And
Something called a phone booth.
Because there was not a cell phone. There was not a cell phone. I had to go to a phone booth and call the officials at the pilot, Quebec. Could barely understand the people in Quebec anyway. They say we have clearance to go. We can go now. Okay, so we're going to go now. So we go, and everybody's asking me about the weather, and I'm telling you, it's all-out blizzard, and these guys don't want to fly. But we have to go, I guess. So we go. We get to Bedford, Mass., where the charter is. We get on the plane. Off we go. So the pilots, halfway through, the flight attendant comes back, and she says, you want to sit up with the pilots? They want to have you up there in the jump seat. And I said, I'd love to. I've never done this. So I went in the cockpit, and I sat in the jump seat as we were on approach to Quebec City. And it's all white. And then there's this, we live in the Emerald City, but it looked like the Emerald City. It's all the lights. And that's Quebec City. You know, if you've ever been there, it's beautiful. But there's like 8 feet of snow everywhere. And we land, I can barely see the strip, but they did clear the strip. And we landed, and it was a perfect landing, and the players all applauded. And we get outside, and the wind's blowing, and their bags are falling over. We get on the bus, and we go to the old Chateau Frontenac Hotel in downtown Quebec City. And I'm frazzled.
You made it.
Not yet.
Oh, no.
So my hair, you know, picture my hair, all right? My hair doesn't move, right? Because of all the crap I put in my hair, right? So I've got the hair, and I get kidded about that with the players. Anyway, I'm first off the bus because I got to go in and make sure the keys are ready like Baxi does for us. And so I scramble, and he can't see the hotel. There's 20-foot drifts abutting the front of the hotel. And Jimmy Rutherford, you know, right behind me, he has to get his key first. He's anal about it. Mm-hmm. And he's got to get his key first, and off he goes, and he doesn't care about anybody else. He does, but that's his thing. Mm-hmm. So we get to what I think is the door of the hotel, and I'm pulling the door, and it's not the door. Oh. It's just a fake door. What? And then the other door is over here, and he's like, you can't find the door, can you? And I said, Jimmy, enough. And anyway, we went down and we went into the hotel and we got there, but it was hair-wise.
I got you here.
It was, that was interesting.
Oh, no shot I would have been in the jumper seat. I would not have wanted to see that.
It was unbelievable.
And I think people be surprised though. For as much as we travel, there's a lot of people who do not fly well, whether it's players, the staff, and everything else, but to be able to sit through a storm like that and actually see what they're doing. And I feel like I'm a pretty good flyer, but I don't think that I would even have wanted to go in the front and watch that one.
And we had a couple guys that were real bad, like a really, really bad. And one of the most noteworthy, horrible flyers was Gretzky. And he used to fly up front all the time because he was afraid. So they used to bring him up. Legends are that they brought him up to the cockpit quite a bit.
Maybe if you get to see, you feel a little bit better, but I think I'd be the other way. I would be
I think so too.
Let me close the window and just.
Yeah.
I had just about had it, you know. I got to my room and that was awful.
Oh, great story.
Awful. And they were just riding me. The players were riding me, and you know, And then they'll add their little jokes on the way into the hotel, okay. Yeah. Okay. Kind of like Eddie, like Eddie starts in on me and he won't stop. Yeah. Kind of like that.
Well, speaking of Eddie, well, I would think the fans would agree that I think we have the most fun on our broadcast. And a true testament to your and Eddie's great banter is that there are people online that think you don't get along with Edzo. So how would you explain your guys' friendship?
We got to clear up the rumors.
I hate him. I despise that guy. I just have to work with him,
Don't we all?
He's a brother. He's a brother I never had, and he's got brothers, and I never had a brother, and wish I did. So he's one of many that I'm lucky enough to have in the game. I have a lot of friends, luckily, and he's at the top of the list. And he and I, for whatever reason, have always had this great chemistry together, even when he played, and I covered him. I always tell the story about when I met him for the first time and he kind of shunned me, and I was up from the minors to do a radio game, and I stuck out my hand to say hello to the great Eddie Olczyk, because he was,
he's a stud.
He was a legend and still is, but he was a legend when in the 80s, poster boy and all kinds of relationships with, Hollywood people and whatever. He was out there. So anyway, Eddie, I'd like to introduce myself, and he gave me the old, "Hey kid, how you doing?" He walked away, and I kid him about that, but that is a true story. But he was always engaging. He was always fun to talk to. And then when he got into coaching, I covered him that way, and he had his coaching career in Pittsburgh, and then he went right to the booth. And then we started working together, I think, for the first time in around 2000 for ESPN, and we hit it off. And then we've come and we've gone and we've done hundreds and thousands of games together nationally. And then when we synced up here, it was unbelievable. But we do, and you're a big part of it too, and you are too. We try to have fun. So I have a theory about what we do, and it's ICE, right? So ICE is the key thing to keep in mind. It stands for information, be informative, be concise. Right? Because we have to be concise with what we do, because the attention span of the viewer is not as great as we think it is. So you got to be concise and hit them with information that they can grab onto, and you have to entertain. You have to entertain the right way. And I think we do. We get off the rails, but we know when we're off the rails, we can do it at that time within the game, the way the game is. And the fans enjoy it. And we're a little silly at times, and we lose some people because we're older, and our references can be a little bit dated, but we do, like I say, we do have Google now.
We do.
And there was a time there was no Google, so you would lose people, but now if you take the time to look at it, you might figure out what the heck we're talking about. But anyway, and I hope that we're just the same as we are off the air. I said that with my good friend Trip Tracy in Carolina for a number of years. I said to fans, because they're like, you two guys, like the odd couple. He's really off the charts sometimes. But I told him, I said, stop trying to be Joe Broadcaster. Just be yourself. Throw yourself out there. That's what you two guys do, right? Just, we're all different. But when you try to be somebody else, that's when you get screwed up. So if a fan is lucky enough to have dinner with us, if it's me and Eddie, it's going to be, tonight we're having dinner. And there will be arguing. And I'll get up and I'll go to the men's room and I'll release a little tension and I'll come back. I don't even have to use the facilities. I just have to get away from him, and then we'll go back and forth, and then everybody comes over and laughs and whatever. But that's the way we are. And that's the way we are on the air, and we love what we do, and we're proud of what we do. We have a great broadcast here.
Yeah, I don't think there's a great balance, knowing when to reel it back in, but at the same time, the stories are fantastic. Even though I don't understand a lot of some of the things that go on.
We're like the checks and balances,
but no offense to the great players that play the game, right? But there are times there's nothing happening. Okay.
It's a long season.
And if you were to ask the players, they'd be honest too. They'd be like, oh my God, this is, but it's just the way hockey is. It comes and goes, and there's ebbs and flows. And in today's game, there's a lot of possession, and there's a lot of cycling, and there's a lot of rimming of pucks. And teams will rim, and the other team will get it, and they'll come up and they'll rim it again, and they'll come up and they'll rim it again, or consecutive icings. What are you going to do? You gotta figure out a way to do that and not take ourselves seriously.
Yeah.
Which we don't. Everything he says to me.
You take your work seriously.
There's a couple things that get under my skin, but I get him back in the long run, you know, and then the way JT is, he's a great buffer for both of us. And, you know, he gives us another avenue because he's just fresh off the game. So like last night, we talked about officials. That was good because I'm talking about a guy that's long gone. Okay. Who was iconic, but I mean, long gone. And you'd have to be a fan from my era and beyond to even know who I was talking about. He was talking about a guy that probably people can't relate to. But then JT talks about Wes McCauley still officiating. So the story resonates with fans because we kind of tie it all together instead of just two guys talking about people they have no idea. Oh, they're older refs. I just don't get it. But now I understand that JT kind of like talking to Wes McCauley on the ice. You know, that's
Speaking
cool.
of Wes McCauley, Grant had to step out, our producer, but he let us know last night after he was listening to the broadcast that he is a huge Wes McCauley fan and that he actually, one of our equipment managers, Jeff Camilio, got him a signed Wes McCauley ref jersey.
Well,
so
yeah,
pretty cool.
Wes is a great guy. And I'll tell you one of the few things about being in a bubble for 72 days and covering the league is that we were there with the officials. And so we got to talk to them because they had nobody to talk to. And we got to sit with them in the lounges and in the hotel lobbies and just talk about the game and how they see the game. I got to know a lot of the guys. And in the playoffs, we travel with them. So when you go from playoff game to playoff game, you're usually with the officials too, in the next morning, going to the next game or whatever. And you know what? I got a theory on this. It's a hard job. They miss calls, but it's not a job I could do. And it's not a job that most people could do or want to do. And so because of that, very seldom do we harp on officiating. Every once in a while we will, but very seldom will we do that. And I just ran into somebody the other night who's one of the supervisors, and he said, you know, thanks a lot for the way you kind of present us because you're fair to us. And I said, well, I try to be, and I don't have all the answers either, but only when we think there's something egregiously wrong or the team has been wrong, which might happen once a year.
Yeah, it's not very often.
You know, on judgment calls, if it's hooking, a slash or whatever, hey, that's a judgment call. It's when they incorrectly get a rule kind of misconstrued. And that's when you have an issue. Maybe you want to say something, but there are some homer announcers who I try not to be, who cross the line and, you know, go after them. And, you know, I don't like that.
Yeah. Like if it's a call against the Kraken, no matter what, it's a bad penalty. Well, you know, like you can tell, right? Like we know if that's a penalty and just call it as you see it. I mean, I think that's one thing you've always said too, is just use your opinion, say what it is. And, you know, at the end of the day, even if it is against the Kraken, it's still.
And you know, it's funny you bring that up because in North Carolina, where it's basketball, right? It's rich college basketball tradition on Tobacco Road. They hate officials. So if you sit through a game, and a good friend of mine's a big Tar Heel fan, right? If you sit through a regular season game with this individual, he is dissecting every foul. And he's telling you that they've had it in for this guy for years and they know the officials. And imagine there's a whistle every 3 seconds in basketball.
You wouldn't like that either.
Oh my God. It's awful.
Got to have a feel, right? So it's not every time. We always talk about it on the air. It's just the standard, right? So if we're going to call the tic-tac penalty, well, then that's what it's going to be. Or we're going to let things go. All right, well, that's how we're going to play the game today. And as long as it stays to that standard. So I don't think we rarely, like you said, get into the officials too much when it comes to the game, but they do have an incredibly hard job and how fast the game is.
They do, and they have to manage, you know, the pressure. And when we get to the playoffs, it's a different ball game. And those coaches, and then what people don't see is after the game and the off day, the supervisor of officials has to listen to both general managers, and they're both crying about something every single day. It's something else. Yeah.
Well, speaking of general managers, we have just a couple of minutes left here on the podcast, but I really wanted to make sure that we could talk about your long relationship with general manager Ron Francis and what it's been like to work alongside him for so much of your career as well as his, and see him kind of grow and develop and work his way through this league too.
I've seen so many different sides of Ronnie, and they're all great and kind of different ways. So when I first got the job in Hartford, he was a visiting player coming back to Hartford, and it was a big deal the first game back. And I was involved in PR, so I had to get all the passes organized for him, for his family, and for his friends, and make sure that he was handled with class. The people I worked for didn't necessarily share that, okay, they didn't. They were defensive about the trade.
Yeah.
And I had to make a decision to do right by him. And I did. And I was told this is not, the owner didn't like it. The president of the team didn't like it. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just tried to do the right thing. So I got to meet him there. He was a wonderful guy, but he played for Pittsburgh and so on. And then it was in the late 90s where we signed him in Carolina as a player at the end of his career. And he came in there and single-handedly turned the culture of the team around. He completely turned it around like as soon as he showed up. And I've never seen that one. Now, they've been lucky there to have two guys like that, Brenda Moore and him. Roddy was a little bit, he's Mr. Hurricane now, but when he got there, he wasn't really, truth be known, he wasn't really Mr. Hurricane. He came from Philadelphia. He was a little sour about the trade. He wasn't sure about playing there because of lack of fan interest and all these things. He came from Philly, right?
Right.
Ronnie played in Greensboro right away. We weren't even in Raleigh yet. So we're still playing out of market, and he did so many things. And the thing about him was it was community-based. He did, at that era, for that kind of player, a superstar player, he did everything we asked him to do, everything. And so he was first class. And I've always told JT this. He was the best practice player I've ever seen.
Yeah.
When I watched him practice, it was fun because he was always the best player. And he wasn't necessarily a gym rat. So Brenda Moore was a gym rat. Ronnie wasn't. Ronnie rode the bike and got himself ready to go, and he had his own way of doing things. But it was something totally different. So then off he went, and it was bad at the end because his career was coming to a halt. They traded him to Toronto, and then the lockout happened where they canceled the season. So his career was taken away by a work stoppage. He wasn't allowed to come back and finish his career and have a swan song with some team. And then Carolina won a Stanley Cup without him being part of the organization. He was there as a fan. But then he came back, and I was working there in my role. He came back as a coach first and then management. And, we always had a good relationship, but there's a line. And I never, I don't go out to dinner. I don't fraternize too much because there's a line there in terms of what I do and what he does, and I can't cross it. Still don't. But to get to the end of the story, after he was let go and he left North Carolina, and I stayed for a couple more years, and then my end came. My contract ended June 30th, 2020. On July 1st, 2020, the first phone call I got at 9 a.m. was from Ron. And he called me, and he had called me the previous summer. I was in New York City with my daughter. She had a dance thing at Radio City. And he called me and said, any interest in coming to Seattle? And I told him no. I said, I can't see me ever leaving North Carolina. I want to do more national work, and I am, and there's a chance I might be, doing Doc's job at some point with NBC, and I don't think I'm leaving Raleigh. Okay, good. And I never heard from him again until that day. He asked me one question. He said, how are you? I said, not good. How's your family? I said, not good. We're not too good. He says, all right, do me a favor. I'm going to put you in touch with Todd Lewicki. Will you just listen to him? I said, sure. And so Todd started a conversation within an hour with me that lasted 3 months. And Todd, whatever happens here, and I hope I'm here a long time, Todd single-handedly helped me through something that never happened in my career, whereas I was out of a job. And it was miserable how I was let go or didn't come to an agreement or whatever. We're not going to go into that. Right. But that was, I needed some support, and Todd gave me that and sold me on Seattle. And then I had two opportunities, Tampa Bay or Seattle. I quickly told Tampa Bay, thank you, but no. I listened to Todd a little bit more, and then right around Christmas of 2020 is when they offered me this job, and I leaped at it. It was the best thing I ever did. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's indirectly through Ron. So a lot of people think, well, you've known Ronnie for years, and Ronnie got you a job in Seattle and all this different stuff. He is a dear friend, and Mary Lou's a dear friend of myself and Natalie's, and but there is a line.
Right.
And there's always going to be a line until he's out and I'm out. And then maybe there'll be more. But Ron is a first-class individual, one of the best that you're going to find to ever play this game, work in this game, whatever you want to say. And then, but he handed me to Todd, and Todd's the one that kind of manufactured the whole agreement.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, since this is the John Forslund episode, I know we're getting towards the end here. Might have an inspiring play-by-play or, broadcaster listening to this. Was there any single piece of advice that you would want to share to somebody that might be listening?
Yes, there's 3 things. Number one, and a couple of them are very cliche-like, but they're cliches are there for a reason.
They're true.
Because they're all true. You know, it's like, I can't say some of them. Anyway, work as hard as you can. And people say that, and then do they really do it? So you have to work as hard as you can so you're not letting yourself off the hook. So you have to work like no one sees what you're doing, just like as an athlete. You know, what you do in the summertime, no one sees. It's up to you to do it. If you're going to do it to the nth degree, you're probably going to see great results. You're probably going to be okay if you don't, depending on what kind of player you are and whatever sport it is, right? But those are the things behind the scenes. So as a young broadcaster, if you're aspiring to do this, you got to work harder than everybody else, at least in your mind, so that you have that mindset. It might not be true, but at least you have the mindset of that. Second thing is you have to be yourself. You have to understand that we all have influences, but if somebody's out there and they're kind enough to like what I do, please don't copy what I do because I've already done what I do. I've had influences in my career too, and I've kept them in mind, but I've tried to be myself. And if you can, and as a young broadcaster, I don't think I was entirely. So I think I've grown that way. And I would tell someone younger to try and do it right off the hop. Try and be yourself first. And then what I would say is it takes so much luck to have things fall into your place. You better be ready for luck, and you better accept that, because there's going to be rejection. There's going to be things that don't go your way, and other people get jobs and you won't understand it, but you can never give up. And, you know, I've had that my entire career, and I still have it today. Even at the level I've reached, whatever the heck it is, there's still times that I don't understand why decisions were made, you know, in my career to do this or that. And how do you get through that? By persevering. Yeah. So for anybody doing this, it's going to take a long time. Put the work in, it'll be worth it. If you get there quicker than somebody else, good for you. But if you don't, it'll help you. And that's the bottom line in broadcasting, because so many people want to get into it. It's a war of attrition. You have to outlast people, and you have to make sure that you're in the right spot and handle yourself the right way. So that's what I would say, and enjoy it, and enjoy what you do, and don't get consumed by what you want.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The comment about luck too is also why the work is so important, because when you get that luck, you got to be prepared.
Look at the thing about Springfield. That was luck.
Right.
That was not planned. I walked into that elective course in college just because it was an easy grade and sounded interesting to me. I didn't realize that I was performing for somebody who was going to give me some advice. I didn't realize I could actually do it. I didn't realize till I did my first game in the American Hockey League that I could do it. And the first thing I said to my wife and my mom when that game was over was, I can do this. But I was so scared the first time I called a game by myself that I didn't think I could do it. And then I recognized, well, I can do it. And then I did it over and over and over again. And then there was a time where a lot of people were getting jobs in the NHL and I was not. And I was like, maybe this isn't going to happen for me. And that's okay, because it doesn't. There are plenty of people, they're very good broadcasters in our sport, that have worked in the American League level for a long time and have had wonderful careers. You know, it doesn't, just because you do games up here doesn't mean you didn't succeed. You know what I mean? I'd want young broadcasters to keep that in mind too. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely. Well, John, we could talk for 2, 3, 4 more hours.
This was fun.
We will definitely have to have you back. I am so grateful for your time for this, but also all of your time and your advice and your presence that you have been for JT and I. I feel so lucky every day that I get to come to work with you.
You two are doing a great job in what you do for your main roles, but in this situation right here, you just keep growing this opportunity here with the podcast, because your next generation, both of you are. So you're connecting with a wide range of our fans, which is vitally, vitally important. So keep up the great work. And a good friend of ours just strolled by with a big smile on his face.
Yeah, Ron just walked by, gave you a little look there.
There he is telling stories again. Yeah. But anyway, keep it up. Keep it up. I listen, and you got to do it because it's really important.
Well, John, thank you so much. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Grant.
Listening.
Thank you.
I feel like, I'm sure that everybody listening feels like they just had a great conversation and got so much value out of this. At least that's how I feel. So
every time.
Yeah, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Signals from the Deep. Leave us a review for John Forslund. 5 stars, please.
Yeah, no phone calls.
Yeah, no phone calls. No phone calls.
I take calls.
Yeah. JT, anything else?
Oh, just thanks, John, for coming on, and we're going to have you on many more times because this isn't, like you said, we get to talk for 2-3 more hours. There's plenty more stories, and
we got to get Edzo in here too.
We need to do both Edzo and John at the same time. So, because he also says the Hey Kid story a little bit differently. He's not able to defend himself right now. So maybe we'll have to get into that one once.
Yeah, there's 2 sides of that story. Yeah. There's mine, which is correct, and there's his, which is totally fabricated.
Well, I have a feeling if we had Edzo here, then there would be no point in you and I being here, JT, because we would just be in the back. Off. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree.
And it was in 1987, so who knows what's true.
Oh, man. Oh, well. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time here. Signals from the Deep.
Signals from the Deep is the official podcast of your Seattle Kraken and is a proud member of the Kraken Hockey Network. Hosted by Piper Shaw and JT Brown. Music composed by Benny Drawbars. Production by Grant Beery. Have a question for the show? Send an email to signals@seattlekraken.com or call the hotline at 206-279-7810. Your message could be featured on an upcoming episode.